Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Well, hello and welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. And my name is ROSSER McDonald, and I'm talking about a book I wrote called Real Prison, Real Freedom. Real Prison, Real Freedom. There's two parts to that title, and there's two parts to this book. First, let me tell you a little bit about me, just to see if it makes any difference whether you care or not. I spent about 17 years doing journalism, radio and television reporting, and sending the story, anchoring the programs sometimes also, the news programs. And that covered, started that in Oklahoma, which, by the way, is my home state. And I spent 5 years at one station there, which was a very good start. And then I moved to Tulsa, to the television station there, Channel 2. And I was there for about 5 years. And then came the big time, Dallas, Fort Worth, Channel 8, WFAA TV. And my journalism career really took off there. I mean, I had lots of different important activities to do. A lot of my time was spent in covering the state legislature, the governor, the state government, and politics in general. And that went on for 5.5 years as well. So that's the summary of that first part of my career. That career changed when I moved from WFAA to the Southern Baptist Radio and Television Commission as a television producer, and spent 27 years producing programs, all, of course, with a religious flavor. But 12 of those years, I did documentaries that went for NBC stations this would be in the 90s and starting in the middle 80s. And I produced 12 of those documentaries for NBC use. Those included trips to Nicaragua, trips to Haiti, where we did programs about how they were recovering or trying to recover from the Iran-Contra war in Nicaragua, and where Haiti was trying to recover from the Duvalier regimes, Papa Doc and then Baby Doc, and then one that followed that really wasn't much better anyway. But we were there to see how churches and missionaries were working to try to bring the factions together, mainly to help them understand that we're all created by the same God, and we have the same opportunity to go and have a fellowship with that God. And then that gives us the basis for making peace with those around us, as we're told over and over. Jesus told us over and over to love your neighbor. So anyway, other programs that included senior citizens doing volunteer work and so on and so forth. Two of those programs, by the way, gained me a nomination for an Emmy. I did not win the actual Emmy each time, but the nomination is a pretty good plum, so I have those. Well, all right, so that tells you about me and where I am. And when I retired, I thought, well, here's something I've got to do. But I'll tell you about that now as we go into the book, Real Prison, Real Freedom, which, by the way, you can order from Amazon or Barnes & Noble, perhaps other companies that sell books. So Real Prison, Real Freedom, I'll go by the book rather than my experience. Well, no, I'll start with my experience. I was researching a program for the NBC series on prison ministry. And when I was doing research to find stories to put into that program, I was at the Cofield unit of the Texas Department of Corrections, and a volunteer chaplain was there and said, "Come with me, I want you to meet someone." So he took me way back into the depths of that prison and introduced me through the bars to a man named Ricky Smith. And Ricky Smith, by the way, is the main character of the book that I'm talking about. So Ricky and I had a little chat there, and we kind of seemed to hit it off. Ricky, well, he was a unique individual, and I was drawn to him through that meeting and greeting. And so we corresponded, and I went back to visit him a few times. And as I got more and more acquainted with him and learned more and more of his story, it became a fact that, this was all maybe over, 6, 7, 8 year period of time. And then I retired from my job, and the Lord just wouldn't let it go. And a year or two after I retired, I said, that is a story that has to be told. So that's what I did. That's what caused me to write the book. And so we're telling his story. Now, Ricky's story actually starts with, he was born on Christmas Day, but then was adopted that same day by his adoptive parents. The paperwork was already done. The young girl that had the baby did not want to keep it, wanted it to be adopted, and they wanted a baby. So that all worked out, and it was arranged. So she had the baby and immediately gave it to Celestia Smith, the adoptive mother, and they took him home, named Ricky Smith, and that's their son. So the husband, the father, the adoptive father's name or nickname is Red. And so Ricky had a fairly normal early childhood, but by the time he was going to school or preschool and all, there were apparently some conflicts with other children. Ricky came home with a bloody nose one time, and his dad, Red, told him, listen, you go back and you whip that guy and take a stick and make him eat it if you have to. So that was the attitude of Ricky's dad all the way through. You know, be a man, stand up, take care of yourself. Don't come crying to me. You take care of it yourself, and you take care of it. So that was the teaching that Ricky got during that time, and it stuck with him all the way through. By the way, so he brought a young black boy home with him from school one time, and his dad came home from work, and the black boy was there. They were playing, having a good time. And Red said, "You get out of here and you go home and don't you come back ever again." And then he told Ricky, "You are not to bring those people here to your house. They have their place and they need to stay in it." In spite of the fact, he said that in spite of the fact that he was a very successful superintendent of construction, working on high-rise buildings and so on, the humble buildings and other things there in Houston. And he employed black people there. And one of his favorite associates or lieutenants was a black man, and they got along fine. After work, they'd go to the bar and sit and drink together and all that. But he told Ricky they had their place and they are to stay in it. So that planted the racism gene, or triggered the racism gene for Ricky. And part of his continued upbringing learning was that you don't mess with black people. You don't become friends, or you don't bring them home at least. But anyway, that was the early childhood and getting on into school. But school was tough. Ricky nobody knew it at the time, but he had light dyslexia. And of course, they weren't aware and looking for those things back in those days. This would have been in the 60s. And so Ricky did not have a good chance of learning. His dyslexia interfered. He tried hard, and his father used a belt to make him learn to spell words. And for a while, until his mother brought an axe to the room and said, "You let him out of there, and you stop doing that, or we're going to have trouble." And she had an axe with which apparently she thought she would make trouble, and it was effective because he put away the belt and let Ricky out, and didn't try that anymore. But Ricky got to the 7th grade, and it was just too hard for him. He gave up and he quit. He just wouldn't go to school. When it was time to go to school, he would go and get in his little boat with his dog, and their house was on Chocolate Bayou. All of this is in the southern part of the Houston area, not in Houston itself, but in the area. Part of it, they lived in Houston, but mostly out in the outlying areas. Livingston and so on. So this house was on Chocolate Bayou, a very nice house that Red had remodeled and so on. So Ricky would get in his boat with his dog, and they would go up and down Chocolate Bayou all day, fishing and so on, and instead of going to school. Well, eventually, of course, the school system's upset about that because they say he's playing hooky. Well, in fact, he was. And said he's got to come to school, but he still wouldn't go to school. So school ended for him in the 7th grade. I guess the system finally gave up on him and didn't put him in jail, but for his truant, being a truant. But so his life then was free for him to go up and down Chocolate Bayou, which was mostly what he did. And in that process, there are other nice houses along Chocolate Bayou, and he would see something. He saw something in a yard or somewhere that he thought he would like to have. So he looked around. These houses are pretty well empty because everybody's gone to work. And so he went up and got what he wanted. and put it in his boat and took it home. And he, well, other times he would see other things. And finally he decided that these people are not here anyway, so I can do what I want. And he went and did some, what the sheriff called a burglary. And it became a kind of a sheriff's problem there, up and down there, because the people all got together and said, somebody's been stealing stuff out of our houses and our yards and so on. So we need to do something about it. So the sheriff was investigating, and he had known about Ricky roaming up and down the area, and he was the prime suspect. See, I have a question here. A question from a fair goer. Do you read your book reviews? How do you deal with bad or good ones? Well, bad ones, I see if they have any, have merit to them, have a reason to be bad. And if there is, of course, I can't rewrite the book at the time, but I can keep that in mind and appreciate whatever kind of justifiable criticism that someone can give me. And good reviews, I guess basically you do the same thing, because I'm not going to rewrite the book, and I'm not working on a sequel to try to fix that. But I appreciate reviews, whether they're good or bad, and I do read them. My website, we just changed, and I think it would be ROSSER.McDonald would get you to my website. And you're welcome to leave reviews, good or bad. I appreciate all of them. So we're talking about Ricky here. Is the sheriff has decided Ricky must be involved in this burglary ring that's going on around the area. And so he arrests him. He gets, has a little experience with jail, and he gets out. And then it becomes more serious things for Ricky that the sheriff is checking into. And Ricky, in the meantime, was getting up into bars and using drugs and so on and so forth. So he gets arrested again, and this time he gets a charge for possession of drugs, goes to prison. A 10-year sentence, but he took care of that sentence. He did it in 2 or 3 years with good time and so on and so forth. And he got out and he went home. His parents had divorced in the meantime, which is another story I need to remember to tell you. They had divorced, so he went to his mother's house. And she said, now, if you can stay away from all that stuff for 3 months, I'll buy you a motorcycle. Well, he did stay away for 3 months, and she bought him a motorcycle, new Harley Davidson. So he was cruising around, and his on and off girlfriend, one-time wife, Becky, saw her there at a drive-in. So he pulled in, they chatted, and so on and so forth. And they were talking, and a police car across the street turned on its lights, and they were stopping a person whose registration was not legal. But Ricky thought they were after him. So he jumped on the motorcycle. Becky jumped on the motorcycle behind him, and they took off. And the police, when Ricky took off, they thought, oh, there's somebody we got to chase. So they chased him. Well, a couple of blocks down the street, a car pulled in front. Well, actually, when he took off from the drive-in, he took off so fast that he lost Becky. She was sitting in the back, and he lost her right there. But then this couple of blocks, this car pulled in front of him, and Ricky ran into the car. It had no choice, and flew over the car, and he split everything. Pills went flying everywhere on the street, just scattered all over the street there. So the police caught up with him, of course, with the wreck. And they were looking, and they found, of course, all the pills. And so there's a new charge of possession, even, I think, sales of prohibited substances. and off he goes to prison again with a 10-year sentence. So we'll come back to that 10-year sentence here in a minute. I see a question from the audience. Let me check on that. I have to use the glasses, as you can tell. Can you think of any news story that you have read or watched on television, which, according to your opinion, was an excellent piece of journalism? Boy, that's a tough question. I mean, I've seen so many stories and all on television. I can't think of a specific story, but I'll tell you some of the people that I like, that I appreciated in journalism. And let me explain that when I was doing journalism, which would be in the 60s and 70s, it was a different era. People at that time respected the media people. When you got your evening news, you believed it because you had no reason not to believe it. And it was accurate that you should believe it. At my station at Channel 8, I could not give my own personal opinion on the news without going to the station manager and getting permission to do a commentary, and it has to be labeled a commentary to people to know it's my opinion, not the news. So we kept those things separate at our station, and generally speaking, that was the way things were. You didn't give your opinion, and you read a news story and then say, "Well, I think the governor, blah blah blah." We didn't do that back then, and people respected the news media and believed it. And so you could go to bed after your evening news and feel like you know what's going on around the world, or you're part of the world anyway. And now, of course, there's just so much opinion and argument and putting down and so on. It's just totally different. And I'm so glad that I finished my career before it got that way, and I would not be in the media now. But a favorite journalism story, I don't know. Frank McGee was a reporter on NBC. He was a general reporter. He covered all of the space flights in the beginning times of our space career. And so he would be sitting at, waiting for them to launch something. Well, they'd have a hold. Oh, we've got a hold for an hour. Well, that left Frank there for an hour to fill. But he did it so well. He knew his subject so well. He knew what they were doing, what was happening, and he was able to be very informative. And it did not feel that much like just killing an hour like I'm doing now. But so Frank McGee was one of my favorites. Chet Atkins, what's his last name? Brinkley and Chet, they were a partner, did the two-man thing on NBC. And Chet was one of my favorites. He was very serious. He gave his stories in a very serious manner. And I decided that that's who I wanted to replace in my career. I move up my career into NBC, and I'll take Chet's place there because I want to be like him. But I don't think of a specific journalism story that I can relate to you. For the research for this book, of course, I read many articles in many different newspapers looking for what would be germane to Real Prison, Real Freedom. And so I had a lot of experience with different newspapers there than just the ones I got in my hometown. So I went to, through all of that and doing research. The research, by the way, and this book was written over like a 6 or 8 year period, not because I was writing all that time, but because I had to do research and because I was retired and didn't, played golf a few times, a lot of times if I could. But But anyway, over that time, I was working on the book as well. And I had to research. It had to be accurate because I'm dealing with the state agency, and the state agency has, all of their policies and records and so on. And so they would be able to. They would check my figures, my facts, and what I'm saying about them. They're very sensitive about what you say about them, by the way, which is natural. But also, we're talking state government, the legislature, and so on. So I had to do a lot of very meticulous research to go into this book to make sure that there was not an inaccurate thing to discount. If there is, it will help give the reader the opportunity to discount the rest of the book if they find something wrong. Another part of the research was the part of the book where a federal judge took over the Texas prison system, saying you are treating inmates unconstitutionally. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. But that was part of the research. That had to be researched and had to be accurate. So I used transcripts from the trials and the appeals that were given. And I had those transcripts to go through and use as a guideline. So let's see what this next question is here. I'm glad for anybody to ask a question. How would you manage the stress of tight deadlines? Well, I didn't have stress. I'm just, that's my nature is, okay, we'll get done what we can get done. And if we can't get it done, the rest of it done, we'll pass. And that was just kind of my attitude, not in a flippant way, but just being diligent to get done what I can with a deadline. And I had deadlines day after day in the news business. You go out and I beat those deadlines. I changed the deadlines because I don't know. I'm either long-winded. I like to think I'm thorough. It was being thorough in telling the story, and that the story is important enough that they'd say, you got 30 seconds for that story. Oh man, I need a minute. Well, you can have 45 seconds or whatever. And then I'd take a minute. But, those were in the newscast and they were able to make those up. But I had to get news film ready. And back then we were processing our own film there at the station. We had to wait for film to be processed and then what editing we could do before the story was finished. And so, of course, there were deadlines. You got to get that done. If you don't get it done now, it doesn't go on the 6 o'clock news. It can wait and go on the 10 o'clock news. But of course, I would like for it to be on both newscasts. And usually we were able to accomplish that. But I just, my nature is not to be stressed by those kind of things. You be realistic about what you can do and what you can't do and go with it. That's been my attitude. Whoops, another question, but it went, here it is. How do you ensure your work is accurate and factual? Well, that is a good question because things have to be accurate and factual. Ricky Smith has an amazing memory, and much of what went into the book, what into his story was his story that he was remembering parts of and explaining to me and telling me about. But also, I can't just say, okay, he said it, so there it is. I talked to other inmates who would verify that what Ricky had said. And then I would talk to warden. I had several wardens interviewed, and so I think you may hear in the background some barking. That's Max, the dog here where I live. But maybe he'll quit in a minute. I forgot to shut the door to this room. Sorry. And so then I have to also go and check. I asked the Texas Department of Corrections if I could, to have Ricky's record the record they have about Ricky Smith. They wouldn't give it to me. They wouldn't allow me to look at it. So I'd talk to wardens, I would talk to chaplains, I would talk to other inmates, all to verify Ricky's story, and they all checked out. But also there's the research I mentioned with the state agencies, with the courts, and then the complication of the federal court coming in and taking over. But when there are trials, you have the transcripts of the trials that you can use. There's I looked in all the newspapers to find as many newspaper articles as I could, and there were many about the prison system, but very few of them were actually about Ricky Smith. But I talked to his mother, interviewed his mother several times. I talked with his dad. I did not get an actual interview with his dad, but I did with his mother several times, and with a friend of his mother's, a very good friend. And all of them basically verified the things that we have in the story. Also, Becky, who was his girlfriend off and on, even his wife at one time while he's in prison. And Becky also, she knew the story, and she was able to verify many, many things, and the whole general story of him being a violent man. In fact, that's what led to his change. She was talking to the chaplain. She stayed at Hospitality House in Huntsville, which was a house built for people to visit inmates in that area, and Ministry of Texas Baptist. And so she was staying there. And one evening she's in the living room talking with the chaplain there, Bob Norris. And she's talking about Ricky being so angry, having such rage. And I wish I could find some way to help him find peace. And Bob Norris said, well, he can find peace in Jesus Christ. And she said, oh, yeah, he won't listen to that. But Bob Norris said, well, I can try. And she said, oh, please do. He couldn't go see him because he's not on his visitors list. So he writes a letter. And he wrote a letter to Ricky and telling him that Jesus does love him in spite of what he's done, and that he would, accept him. So he wrote that letter to Ricky and sent it to him. Well, Ricky pretty soon, he went and followed with more letters. Well, pretty soon Ricky wrote back to Bob Norris and said, what are you doing? Why are you sending me all these letters and all this garbage that you're sending to me? Some of the letters he just tore up in little pieces and scattered out on the cell block. But that first letter, he stuck back with some other letters and things that he had kept. And that becomes instrumental in his story later on. Let's see what this question is. If you could improve your writing, what would you change? Well, I'm always open to improvement. And I have said many times that I have never written anything. I wrote so many news stories, documentaries, and so on over the period of, 27 years or whatever, that, but I always said I have never written anything that can't be improved by rewriting it. And I had that attitude about news stories that I would write. I had that attitude about documentaries that I would write the scripts for. And I just, I would go over everything and make improvement. I always found something that I would improve with it. But in a general sense, I guess this question is geared to, what can I do to improve? I don't know. I'm not sure. Just to be more careful and more cognizant, more, find out more opinions of other people, and include those things in the story as they are appropriate. And that would be the way that I would think I would help the story to be accurate. Now, there's another part of writing a story, and that is to make it interesting. you can write down a lot of facts and they're not going to catch anybody's attention if it's just facts. So you need to have, you need to be able to put that into context and have, a story with some, inviting kinds of vignettes or whatever. And I put a few of those in the book. I think that is one of the, would be the primary weak point of Real Prison, Real Freedom is, there's not so much in there that would make a viewer laugh or a reader laugh or, draw them to a personal connection there so much. And I wish that there were more, because there are more in reality. Okay, let's see this question. What skills do you employ when interviewing individuals for stories? Well, interviews to me are just getting that person to tell me something. I use my own curiosity. I don't really have a set of questions to ask people. And in doing these programs, by the way, I've been asked, what questions do you want me to ask? And I say, I don't want to give you questions to ask me. You ask me whatever you're curious about me or about the book. And that's what I would do when I interview people, is to just ask them questions that would lead them into telling me about whatever, if there's some incident or some policy or whatever that we're talking about, that would lead them to give me their opinion about it. And so my technique is just using my own curiosity, basically, about what this person is involved in, or what their incident is that we're wanting to interview them about. And in the process, I think that I was told by some people that I am a good interviewer, that my interviews are well done, and so on. So I'll accept. I'm not bragging about that, but that's their opinion. And that opinion helped me to feel, okay, well, I'll keep doing what I'm doing. And to interview someone, of course, some people some interviewers get carried away, because they've learned the story before they do the interview, and they want to show that they know the story. And they shouldn't do that. You want that person to tell you the story. You don't want to tell the story yourself. So you use questions that get them to say, well, we were out there and such came along, and so on. But that's my approach to interviews, is to gear up to find out from the person, not from me. And of course, this is when you're doing it for a TV newscast or whatever, you've got a camera there that's capturing everything that's going on. So you ask them the questions that will help them to bring to you the story about whatever this incident is that we're putting on the news. So now, where were we? We were at, I don't know where we were. But anyway, I want to tell you about, back to Ricky's childhood. He was so concerned about his parents arguing and so on, and he was usually caught in the middle of it. And he certainly felt that he was caught in the middle, and he took a lot of blame that was not warranted. Some, of course, I guess would be warranted, but he was a kid. And he was concerned about his parents, and that continued and grew. They separated. Red was in Louisiana on a job, and Celestia was at home with Ricky. And the friend got them to go with her to Chocolate Bayou Baptist Church, which in that same area, Chocolate Bayou. And at that point, there in church, Ricky went a few times, and then in the summer, he went to Vacation Bible School. Well, during that, he learned some knowledge of God, of who God is, and that God, we can relate to God, care about God, which didn't really mean much to him, but it was knowledge he stored in his head. And he learned that he's supposed to pray and talk to God and tell him what you want, what you need. And so he did that. And the prime thing that he would talk to God about was getting his parents back together and to be a happy home. Well, that didn't happen. Red came back and they tried it again, but it didn't work. And so then they're talking divorce. Well, Ricky is very upset about that. And one day, after a big argument he had heard, he went outside and went across the road. There's a grove of trees there. And he went over there and he looked up through those trees. It was dripping rain. And he said, God, if that's the kind of God you are, I don't want to have anything to do with you. You can go to hell. So he wrote off God at that point because his parents were divorcing. And so that put the basis of his relationship with God on the record. That came up, but later on, I mean, that was the way he treated anyone like coming in prison to talk about God, to have a chapel meeting or whatever. Ricky was not interested whatsoever because he wanted nothing to do with that kind of a God. Okay, let's see here. Would you be hesitant to ask uncomfortable questions? Well, yes. No, I would not be hesitant. Well, maybe hesitant. I would think about how I was going to shape that question if it's an uncomfortable question. But if it's part of the story, you have to ask the question. You just find a way to be sensitive to the situation, sensitive to the person, to ask that kind of question. You might even want to preface your question with saying, I know this could be uncomfortable for you, but I have to ask it. It is germane to the story, and go ahead and ask the question. And I would be willing to do that. I did that many times in interviewing people. So, but I think that's important. You can't just skip the uncomfortable part if it is germane to the report you're doing. If it's not germane, leave it out. Don't worry about it. Don't push it. Don't make people uncomfortable for no reason. Your reason is to get the story. That's the, and then and anything beyond the story or around the story that doesn't fit or you don't have time for, leave it out and don't worry about it. Okay, so Ricky has written off God. Now we'll jump back to the Bob Norris story because he wrote that letter. But Ricky had he was known as the most violent man in Texas prison because he was always stabbing guards or trying to stab guards and so on. So he earned the reputation justifiably that he was the most violent man in Texas prison. This was brought out in court. And so he earned that reputation because he was attacking guards as well as other inmates, making knives, get a piece of his bunk and make a knife out of it, or a spear that he made out of it. One officer, he speared, and it went all the way through the man to his back. He should have died, but he didn't because there happened to be a doctor on the unit, and she knew what to do, and she helped him and got him into the emergency room, and he lived, and he's still with us. So that reputation of most violent man is what Ricky has, and it comes from his ability to think up ways that he's going to attack someone. He had 3 trials for attempted murder. In those 3 trials, he came in with 10 years. Those 3 trials added 3 99-year sentences. So he has over 300 years in sentence to serve in the Texas Department of Corrections. And he's still, he's thinking up all these ways that he can try to attack. His goal is to kill someone. He really wants to kill someone because he would like to go to death row because he thinks death row would be a better place than where he is. And so he and 2 other inmates devised a plan that they were going to get the keys from that the officer had and open up the cell blocks, and then they were going to get out. There's one guy in particular that they want to kill because they labeled him as a snitch, thinking that he was one who gave information to the FBI about Becky. Becky had been smuggling drugs into Ricky for, over a long period of time. She just, every time she came to visit, she brought drugs, or she planted drugs somewhere where he could get them or whatever. And so they thought that this guy was the snitch and they wanted to kill him. The other two had other reasons to want to kill him. So that was the goal of the whole trio. And they devised this plan to get the keys. The officer would leave the keys sitting on the desk when he would go somewhere. Well, he had to go take someone to recreation or the shower or whatever, and left the keys on the desk. And Ricky had this, they made a pole out of magazines that he used for, his cell was right by the shower. So he was close to that table where the keys were. So he used this pole made out of magazines and got over, and he got the keys and started bringing them back, but the keys were too heavy and they pulled his magazines apart. So that plan didn't work. And of course, they got reparations from the officers for trying. And so Ricky he's just really down on himself. And he says, they had tried two other ways to try to get out to kill that snitch, and none of them worked. So Ricky is down on himself, and he says, my plans have always worked. What's the matter now? Why can we not accomplish this? What's against us? What's causing us? Is God on the side of these people over here and he's protecting them? So, he brings God into the picture there. Then he decides, well, God is against me. It's God that is keeping me from being able to accomplish these plans. And God, why are you doing that? So at that time, he got that letter out from Bob Norris, that very first letter that Bob had written. And he went through that letter. He was going through other material. He's trying to find some answers. Why would God be opposing him and keeping him from doing these things? It's hard to think in that mode. He's keeping me from doing these things because they shouldn't be done. But anyway, he got the letter from Bob Norris, and he read through it. And down towards the end of that letter, Bob is quoting Jesus from Matthew, saying, "Come to me, all who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Well, that word jumped out at Ricky. Rest. That's what I need. Rest. And so he got the Bible. He looked more and more about what it said about that in that particular passage, and why Jesus was saying that, and what it really meant, trying to find out from him. And finally he said, "Okay, Jesus, I am heavy laden. I will come to you if you'll give me rest." Well, it felt like some boulders taken off of his shoulders. And he felt like, he was tired. He crawled up on his bed and he went to sleep, and he got rest, physical rest. But the next day, then he's got to deal with that and say, was that all hogwash? Did something really happen there? And so on. And that process led him to accept Christ in his life and to let Christ be the leader of his life rather than his human nature. We all have our human nature, and we try to do things in our own human nature with what we know and what we think is the right thing to do. But many times our human nature steers us wrong. But Ricky and of course had been steering Ricky wrong. But now Jesus is the one who is there to guide Ricky's life if Ricky will pay attention and let him, and he did a good job of it. And the volunteer chaplain helped disciple him, told him, you have to forgive everyone that you have attacked, and you have to forgive everyone who has attacked you. Ricky said, "Oh man, I can't do that." And the chaplain convinced him from the Bible, yes, you must do that. And of course, people he doesn't see, he can't do that. But the ones that that God brings across his path, he did. He asked their forgiveness, told them, I'm a Christian, I can't do those things anymore, and I ask your forgiveness for doing that to you, and so on and so forth. So let's see, we have a question. What is the difference between electronic and print journalism? Well, in general, print journalism is you are putting down what the story is, and that guides you when you're telling the story. The other, just talking journalism, you have opportunities to insert your own opinion or bring in somebody else's opinion or argue with whatever is going on. It's just too easy to do that when you're doing it, just doing talking on camera about a story. If you have a strong opinion, it's just tempting to bring that opinion out. And when you're writing the story, you're probably not going to do that. You're going to stick to the story. So I think, in that case, journalism, it just provides a guide for, I say journalism in the sense of writing a story. It gives you a guide to follow when you are telling that story. Well, to kind of wrap things up here, Ricky was learning discipleship. He was learning to forgive all of these people. He did all the opportunities that he had to do that, and he did very well with it. And it turns out that he did that with a warden that he had a run-in with before. Told him he's a Christian and asked for forgiveness. Well, that warden took Ricky on as a project, and he got him transferred from this supercell segregation special built unit to his unit. And in that place, then he was able to work with Ricky a little bit about how not to get in trouble. In fact, he told him, I am putting you out there. You can hit somebody, you can kill somebody, but what you cannot do is say, I didn't have a chance. Nobody gave me a chance, because I have given you this chance. Ricky promised him, I will not start a fight with anyone. I will not even hit anyone. And he has kept that promise, by the way. It's been 30 years. And he has kept that promise all this time and still keeping it because he's still in prison. The warden is retired, but Ricky's still keeping that promise. So that warden was instrumental in helping Ricky with his Christian learning how to be, in this life that he's trying to live now is 180 degrees from the life that he had lived up to that point, that earned him the reputation of most violent man in Texas prison. Let's see here. What are the ethics of writing about historical figures? Well, I mean, probably not a good one to try to answer that question, because all I can say is research. And research includes, of course, what you can find to read, but you have to read all kinds of things. But also, if you have individuals who maybe they knew the person and can add something that way, but oftentimes even they don't, the people who knew them, the witnesses, are not there for you to talk to physically either. But you can read what they have said about things. And I want to say this about all interviews, all stories that you do. Don't be afraid to look at the other side, the other opinion, because the opinion, the single opinion that you may get may have truth in it, may not have any truth in it. But you can check that out, get the other side and see what validity the other side has in their opinions, match the two, or, compare the two and look them over and decide for yourself which is the right way to go. And So that's that's advice I would give for whether it's historical or whether it's somebody who's still here. Well, so we're going a little longer here. Let me just see. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? My younger self, one of the things is what I just said, and that is to get both sides of the story. I needed, we all need to learn that. I needed to learn that. I learned writing. I started it in high school. I had a lot of speech and drama classes. I was on the debate team, and I enjoyed that very much, by the way. And it was a good experience, good learning. So when I went to college, I took one journalism course, which was basically a disaster. And along with the rest of my first year of college, my only year of college. And the one thing I got from college was everything I needed. My wife. I met her there, and we got married a year, 2 years maybe later, whatever. And she was what I needed in my life and made all the difference in many ways. So, incidentally, she helped me with my broadcasting because I was on a radio station. We went my first radio job, and she would listen to me on the radio. And when I'd get home, she'd say, "The word is just, not gist." Oh, well, okay. The word is 100, not 100. And all kinds of ways like that. She corrected me, and sometimes she would have to correct me several times on the same word, on gist or whatever, because it's just natural the way we talk. And I had some good hick in my talk. I had a good voice. I could read well, but I still had that little hickey twang in there. And she helped me with that tremendously. And she helped me in so many other ways, and it was everything I needed. I lost her 2 years ago, and I miss her. But I still remember things that about her and things that she did that helped me, and I still try to follow. Okay, I don't know. Are we? Well, no. Are we going on here? Well, let me tell you about Ricky. An incident with Ricky to wrap this up. What should the editors and the newsrooms do to improve public trust in their media? Oh, man. A lot of what I've been saying is what they need to do, and that is get rid of opinions. Tell the story factually. You've got to get it researched. The editors need to check and see if the reporter has gotten the right figures or if it makes sense. And if they have some stories, you want to find if they have more than one source for the information they're getting, so that, that gives a little more credence to what they're saying if they have two sources that say the same thing or something similar. And the editors need to watch for that, but the reporters have to do it to begin with. And not put your own opinion in it, not use your own opinion in writing a story. You don't write from your perspective. You write from the perspective of the person that is going to read it or going to hear it on their television news. That's what you need to gear it towards, is that viewer. I covered the state legislature of Texas many, many years, and one of the challenges there, people are not interested in what the legislature is doing while they're arguing about this bill and that bill and all that. People don't pay attention. Well, my approach to that was that I had to learn what that bill was all about, how it affects people, how it affects the state. And then in my report, I would tell the people, this is why this legislature is important. And so, that's why you need to pay attention to it, because it's going to affect you if it's passed in such and such a way. So finding the way to gear that to the individual that's watching is the secret to getting to them to pay attention to complicated subjects. I used that later on. That same technique helped me in telling people about Christ, about being a Christian, because that's the same process. They don't know what it says. They haven't been interested in it. So you need to let them know why it's important to them and how it can become important to them. And let's see, it says we have a minute and 52 seconds. Well, I don't know. That's different. That's counting up instead of down. But back to Ricky, he was baptized, and I'll close with this. Ricky was baptized in the prison. The chaplain told the warden that they wanted to baptize him, and he argued with him. It took, I don't know, several times for he and the chaplain requesting permission to baptize him. And finally, the warden gave in and said, okay, you can baptize him, but I'm going to put so many chains on that man that if you drop him in the baptism, he's going to drown. So, in fact, he did put a lot of chains on him. So they brought in a horse trough or something and filled it with water. And they baptized Ricky. He wanted Bob Norris to baptize him, and Bob came into the prison for that purpose. And he did. And he didn't drop him, by the way. And when he raised him out of the water, Ricky gave out a shout. He was just joyful. So they got him out of the tank, and he's going down the hall back to his cell. He's got his dripping clothes on. He's got these chains on him, and they're also wet and dripping. And Ricky's going down the hall, and he sees some people gathered over there, and he says, I've got these chains on my body, but there are no chains on my heart. Because he felt now he's a new person because Jesus Christ is with him, and he has obeyed him in baptism, and he's going to do his best to obey him in all of his life. And he's done very well with that. He has a good testimony now. He tells people they move him ever so often to a different prison unit. And he still has troubles. Many of the officers, they see in his record what he did, or some of them even remember him personally, the way he used to be. And so they give him a hard time. And he has to deal with that. And he has to deal with that in the proper way by saying, I'm sorry I did that back to you then, or whatever, or letting them see him live a Christian life now. Just telling them I'm a Christian. Prison system, that doesn't mean a thing in the prison system. But you prove that by showing people in your daily life that you are now a different person than what they are remembering. And there were the inmates sometimes that would say, oh, Ricky Smith is here on this unit. Oh, boy, if I can whip him, I'll be the top dog around here. So he has challenges from inmates. He has challenges still from some of the Aryan Brotherhood. Of course, I didn't mention back in the beginning that when he first came into this prison term, in a reaction to a guy wanting to tell him about Jesus, he just kicked the bunk and everything else around him, and he went down to into the cell block where the tough guys were, and he said, okay, if you'll have me, I'm in your gang. So he joined the Aryan Brotherhood, got the tattoos and all that stuff. So, and then when he became a Christian, he had to go to the Aryan Brotherhood people, and he gathered, I think there was 13 of them gathered, and he said, I just need to tell you guys, I cannot be in your gang anymore. I have become a Christian, and it's not compatible with being in the Aryan Brotherhood, and so I have to quit being part of your gang. And I know that your gang's motto is blood in and blood out, so you do what you have to do, but I cannot be in your gang because I'm going to be a Christian. I will not tell any of your business. I will not testify anything about you, but I can't be in your gang. Well, they accepted that and let him live. They didn't do anything to him. They accepted it. So he left the Aryan Brotherhood. But every once in a while, an individual would come up, with some something to challenge him on, and they did. But all the challenges that he got, he just let them pass, let them go over back down off roll off his back or whatever, and or tell the person, I'm a Christian, I can't do that anymore, I'm sorry that I did that to you, if that's what the situation is. And and he was living as best he could the life of, I have no chains on my heart. And that's a message that we all need. We all need to get those chains off our heart. You know, the rage and the hatred that Ricky Smith was living with was another prison. He was in a physical prison with walls and razor wire and all of that stuff, guards with guns and so on, that, but he still had the freedom. He was in that prison of rage and hatred because it caused him to do what things that he did. Just like being in the prison tells you how you're going to do this or that. And but he has rejected those things. He has turned that all over to the Lord, and he has no chains on his heart. He is now free, a free man free to do what Jesus wants him to do. Not free to go out and beat up people or steal things or whatever. He's not free to do that. That applies to that other prison with all the walls and razor wire. But he is free from the impulse to want to beat somebody up because they said something ugly to you. He can reject that and accept it or just ignore it. And so that is the freedom that he has. He loves other people. He cares about other people. And in fact, he has been responsible for introducing many inmates to Jesus, and they changed their lives. And even for a few of the officers, he has done that same thing, and continues to be a missionary in whatever unit they may put him to. It's a new mission field. So he does his job of going around talking about Jesus, and that's the goal of his life. He has another goal of helping people when he gets out of prison, if he gets out of prison. He still has 300 years or close to it. No, he's been in there 30 years, so he's got 270 years or whatever. And so he knows he may never get out. But some of these units that they move him to seem to have a program where they're gearing people, training people, teaching them what it takes to get a parole. And so, that he can be hopeful about that, but the prison system has not told him that they are gearing him up for a parole. There's just these little hints along the way. And so that's the story basically of Ricky Smith, and a lot of the story of Rosser McDonald. You can get this book, Real Prison, Real Freedom, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or other places. Our local Barnes & Noble has 2 or 3 copies there last time I was in. So you can even maybe find them in a bookstore, but you can also order it. And the website, I think rosser.mcdonald will get you to my website. I'm not sure about that. Can't be positive because it's brand new and we haven't got everything all geared up. But anyway, you can try that, and I'm going to do blogging on that website, which you might find interesting. Incidentally, one of the things that I will blog about is, a few weeks ago, the New York Times had an investigative report in the paper about Rikers Island, that infamous prison of New York City. And they're saying that inmates are running several units of the prison. Many cell blocks are under the control of inmates. They have weapons, they have keys, they can get around, they can do whatever within that cell block. They can't get out of the prison itself because that's a separate guard situation, and you got guards with guns at every corner. But they can do all kinds of things. They can intimidate people, for commissary funds or sex or whatever it is. They have control of that cell block, and the prison system seems to just leave it alone. Well, you can find that in my book also, because the beginning of the problem with that the federal judge addressed and took over the prison system for was using what they called building tenders, and they were inmates, tough, usually all the tough inmates, and they were the ones who took charge of their cell block. They would make that cell block, those cells. They kept everybody quiet. They took care of business in the cell block if there was somebody causing trouble. They also, of course, took their own opportunities for intimidating the inmates that they were dealing with. They, could take whatever they want, weapons or whatever, from them. So it was a very, it was always a big thing, and so that was the basis of the federal lawsuit. But now at Rikers Island, they're just kind of leaving them alone, like they had at Texas Department of Corrections, using them, like they used the building tenders in Texas, except they seem to be much more active and tough in their dealing with people at Rikers Island. So anyway, that you could look that up in a few weeks back in the New York Times. And you can also find a similar story, and how they dealt with it. And in my book, Real Prison, Real Freedom. And the fact is, there's that double title. Real Prison it refers to the fact that Ricky is in a real prison. He's in a physical prison, but he was also in a prison in his heart. The prison geared him to do all of the violent things that he did. But then there's the other part of real freedom, how Ricky got out of the prison, his prison. He hadn't gotten out of the walls of the prison yet, but real prison, real freedom. There are two parts to the story. The first one gears you up to why the second one is so important, and that real freedom is available for everyone. So I'll use that to wrap this up, and hope that you are able to find real freedom in your life. Thanks for watching. Well, am I supposed to keep going here? Somebody want to give me some instructions? I mean, we've gone, what does that say, for an hour and 15 minutes, 14 minutes so far. And that's fine. I've enjoyed talking with you and enjoyed your questions. Very glad for the questions that have come from the audience. And that's, like in an interview, I always want to know what that person's story is. I don't want to tell them what I think their story is. I want them to tell me their story. Well, that's kind of the same way here. When you ask a question, then I can tell you what I think you are interested in, what you are wanting to find out. If I am able to help with that, then, I do that. And that is the same way I would do with interviews. And that says I'm still live, so I guess I'll keep doing that. Let me see. I've got some notes here. By the way, Warden Price was very significant in Ricky's life, as I mentioned, And he is teaching now. He's a professor of criminal justice at West Texas State University in Amarillo, Texas. And so now he has a doctorate in behavioral science. And so he learned to pay attention to people, and he would listen. He wanted to get both sides of inmates' stories if possible, and interested in inmates who would respond to him. And he got along very well. He was sent to 3 different prison units as warden that were very difficult, troubled units, had a lot of trouble going on in the unit. And he was able to straighten that out, able to gear the inmates up to act better. And it worked in all those prisons. He had it under control and was moved to another prison for another challenge. And he had, when he was at one of those, the last one of those he went to, he brought Ricky Smith over there and used the processes in that prison to get Ricky out of the segregation mode and into, he still was, in restricted mode, but he did very well. He kept his promise to Warden Price that he would not start any fights. And then they moved Price to a new unit that was not the tough place that he had been to the 3 before. And he moved Ricky there as well. And at that prison, he was able to get Ricky back into general population instead of in the restricted mode. And Ricky did very well with it again. He used his opportunities to minister in chapel and just in going around and talking to inmates. And so that was a whole good opportunity for him. And Warden Price moved to another unit. Ricky couldn't go, but then he moved to another unit in Amarillo, and he brought Ricky up there, and he did the same thing there. So Warden Price was very significant in Ricky's life. Let me see what else we got here. Judge Justice was accurate in bringing the suit that and in taking over the prison system because inmates were controlling other inmates, and Judge Justice said that is unconstitutional, and it's not the way that they are to be treated. Those inmates are not sworn officers or whatever, and officially are not supposed to be in charge of other inmates. And so he changed that. Now, that caused a problem. 2, it was the right thing to do, but it caused a problem because the prison system denied for 2 years that they even have building tenders when it was obvious. I mean, they've had building tenders for years. And because of having the building tenders, they kept the cell blocks under control. So the prison system didn't have to have as many officers and guards out there to do that. And so all of a sudden, the judge says you can't use the inmates. Well, after a trial, courts and all, the prison system had to admit, yeah, we have building tenders. They called them, then they changed it to service inmates or something like that. And but the fact is, the building tenders were no longer able to function as guards and take care of keeping their cell blocks quiet. All of that was changed. They had to move people around and so on and so forth. Well, that leaves you without guards because you didn't have all that many guards anyway. You didn't have, the guards were, half of your guards were building tenders. So now the prison system is half of its staff short, and they're scrambling to try to find more prison officers. Well, in the meantime, you got the gangs pursuing their wars, the Aryan Brotherhood, particularly against the Mandingo warriors, the black gang. but there's other gangs involved too, the Texas Mafia, the Mexican Mafia, and so on and so forth. But you got chaos going on in the prison because the gangs are fighting each other, and then the gangs are fighting the prison system, and that, they're just it's just really a chaotic situation in the prison for 2 or 3 years. And during that time is when Ricky Smith was doing his thing of trying to kill officers, trying to kill inmates, and going on the attack wherever he could, and gaining his reputation as the most violent man in Texas prison. So, so the judge did the right thing, but it brought about bad results, or bad situation for a few years at least, until the prison system was able to hire enough officers and train them and get them in place in the unit. And then things began to settle down, and it began to operate much more as a prison system should. And it's a pretty good prison system now. They do not have the situation that we talked about at Rikers Island, where inmates again are controlling large sections of the prison. But and that is done just by the fact that they're tough enough to take over and take charge and get what they need from other inmates or from officers if there's officers around. But most of the time in that situation, the officers don't hang around, they'll leave. But the inmates that are causing the trouble are the ones who are following their own personal nature. This is what I want, and so I'm going to get it one way or another. I'm going to get it from you. I'm going to get it from wherever I can, because that's what I want. And I want always to have what I want. I don't care what you want. I don't care what you need. I want, and if I want what you have, I'm going to figure out a way to take it, either by force or whatever. And so the human nature is the basis. Well, in fact, the human nature is the basis for having prisons, because if people didn't follow their human nature in the wrong ways, we wouldn't need prisons. People wouldn't be out stealing and killing and all of those things that get them into prison. And so we have to guard our human nature. We have to be aware of our human nature. We don't really pay attention. We just do things by instinct, it seems. But we're following our human nature, is what we're doing. And we need to be getting that into our head to pay attention to what our human nature is telling us to do, and whether that is the right thing to do or not. Just in a human sense, I mean, that's very important. For us to care about other people should be a part of our human nature. And, so often it is not part of our human nature. And so then we are able to put ourselves in the position where we have Jesus' nature. We have spiritual nature to overcome the human nature. And that's not easy to do. We can't do it on our own, by the way. It has to come from God. And but then even learning how to live with that, learning how to live in that mode is a challenge for all of us, whether we're in prison or not. And but it's so important. That's what we need to learn. And the spiritual nature teaches us to care about that other person even more than I care about myself. That is a direct contradiction of our human nature, but it's a contradiction that should become very important in our lives. And it doesn't come easy. I mean, you can think about giving up what I want, in life in general, giving up what I want, which is, $1 million, a fancy car, and a good job, a big, important job. Those are the things that we want. We have to give those up in our human nature and think, well, okay, if God wants me to have $1 million, well, he will figure out how to do it, not me. It's not up to me to do that. I'll follow his direction and see where and go wherever it goes. And that's the most important lesson for us to learn, is controlling our human nature, particularly by following our spiritual nature and letting our spiritual nature override our human nature. I hope that you are able to do that. And in the book, in Real Prison, Real Freedom, there is the process that Ricky went through to overcome his violent nature, his rage and hatred, to become as nice a guy as you'd ever want to meet. I get to talk to him, I don't know, ever so often. He calls on the phone, we chat, and I get to talk with him, and he's doing fine. He's still serving the Lord, talking to people about Jesus, and getting along very well for being in prison. And he'll continue to do that. And Lord, I thank you so much for Ricky and his testimony that he has for those inmates in prison. But more than that, even, I thank you that you supply your spiritual nature for us to guide or overcome our natural human nature, so that we will be better citizens in this country, better family members, better fathers and mothers, and better everything that you want us to be if we're following your nature. And I thank you that you provide that path for us, and just help us now to recognize it and incorporate it into our lives. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, it still says we're live, but I'm worn out. So if somebody knows how to change that and turn it off, we'll do it. Or if you think we need